Imagine a cold night, a walk through the woods. You're alone, but the sound of the forest is with you on your every step. Imagine coming across an old house, feeling an urge to take a look inside, searching for something, someone. And then you find it. You find what you wanted and what you wish you never did. Now, imagine not having to imagine none of this. This is indeed a reality. This is the position I was in when I first saw the gameplay of the remake. This is what I wanted from it if the events of the original were to be told in a different way. And the reason behind it, well, for that I'll have to go way back when I was still a child. Resident Evil 4 is a very special game to me. Not because it was love at first sight, but because it was always on my mind for so long, constantly reminding me of its existence to the point it was unsettling. You see, I always loved creepy stuff, but when I was younger I was also a scaredy cat. At the time, me and my brother would go to our cousin's house. He was the cool kid in the family with a PlayStation, and I would watch them play the original Resident Evil, and it was terrifying. That's when I was aware the series existed. A couple of years later, after we got a PlayStation 2, my brother bought a PlayStation magazine, and there he was, Leon, on the front cover with the title Resident Evil 4. I clearly remember this because we just got back from a trip and we got it from one of the airport stores, and going back home I couldn't think about anything else than that cover. And it's weird, it didn't have anything special at all, but the name alone was getting to me. You know that feeling that you don't want to see something, but at the same time you're so curious you can't hold it in. Well, unfortunately the disc that came with it didn't have a demo of RE4. And I was kinda relieved until my brother borrowed a full game from another cousin of ours and started playing it. I never got the chance to see him play, but one day I decided I was going to try it myself, without him knowing, of course. So here I was controlling Leon, and it didn't seem so bad at first. Then I got inside the house and had my first contact with the ganado. I started shooting relentlessly because I just wanted him to go down and the music to stop, and then it just got worse. No! Okay, it's okay. It's not okay. Leave me alone. I think I must have done this like a lot of times. I can't quite remember how many, but I know the stress levels of this little boy were so high that when Dr. Salvador appeared, he almost had an heart attack. What I do know is that I didn't stop playing here. That happened further down the line after I met Luis. The amount of enemies and the place that I had to deal with them was overwhelming. Most of the time I was trying to gain some courage behind the gate doors, but in the end I never got to the door on the other side, and the music was so intense I was afraid to go out there anyway. So I stopped and never touched that PS2 disc again. A few years passed, but the thought of it remained, and I was thinking about how I never finished it and about the amazing reviews it got. But this was at a time that I had already experienced other games that seemed much worse in terms of raw horror stuff. So I finally bought it and finished the entire game and loved it to bits. It was completely different from what I imagined all those years ago. It can be scary, but it's definitely an action-oriented game, one that I find really fun to play on subsequent playthroughs, and I think you can see where this is going. The thing is, I miss having that intense horror feeling I had when I was a kid, and that's something I will never get back. However, this remake might be able to change that scenario and have this same feeling by incorporating things differently. I know a lot of fans of the original were afraid of the idea of this being remade, but I wouldn't worry too much. The way I look at it is if this was some kind of sequel and not a remake project. The remake will be way more terrifying, and the first one was always more into the action stuff, so it's like now you'll have a complete Resident Evil 4 experience by joining these two games together. And the developers can clearly see this. They know the game better than us. They know what is missing from the original RE4. I mean, not missing in the way that something not being there ruins the game, but as something that could be added to create a new one. They have an amazing base game to work with, and they already figured out how the majority of the gameplay mechanics work, so now it is time to show how scary Resident Evil 4 can really be. And I believe they'll go all in with this one. Of course, some of the stuff will be familiar and have nods to the original, but fear never comes from what you expect. It comes from what you think you know so well, just to be surprised by something that was unexpectedly changed beyond recognition. And this factor will play a major role in the remake because, let's be real, a lot of people played the first one, and they will use this method to make sure you won't have the same experience. And that's the magic of it, really. Even though it is still iconic, the first encounter was partially shown and you can see how much content was put in it this time around. Imagine this being applied to something like the maze in the castle. A small area, and it can be scary, sure, but make it larger, with more corridors and tall bushes for you to get lost. Now amplify it with a well-placed soundscape around you. No dogs still, but you can hear them close to you, right around the corner. From this alone, you'll be constantly waiting for something to happen. This is how fear would work here, you just let it build by itself. And when the right time comes, the enemies would get out of the bushes from the most unexpected places to ambush you. In fact, a lot of what was done in RE4 just needs to be expanded. It looks really good in motion, and the direction they are taking with the areas makes me feel super excited for what's to come in later parts, like the sewer one with the invisible insects, or the lab area with the regenerators, which might put a lot of us back in hell. I can only imagine how these enemies are gonna look in this new engine, which is another thing that favors fear in a big way, since the Ganados already look so good and realistic. Keep in mind they are the most basic of enemies, so we need to start preparing for the rest of them. Another thing I would like to mention is the Ashley section. There's a lot of potential to make this one of the scariest parts of the game, and not just an afterthought. She doesn't need to be completely useless or part of a chase sequence. Capcom can explore her character dealing with the parasite, turning her sections into pure psychological horror, instead of just getting her from point A to point B while solving some puzzles. And I think this is a good moment to utilize some of the old ideas from when RE4 was being developed. I'm not saying they should use the Hookman, but if they did something similar, those type of hallucinations Leon experienced in 3.5 could be something that Ashley would have to endure this time around. Not only it would flesh out more of the story, but if done in a very dark way, it would emphasize the fact that they are infected and how painful it really is to have a parasitic being inside of you. The interactions with the villain type characters will also be done in a much different way, I believe, adopting a more serious tone to it, making it possible to actually be afraid of the moment we have to inevitably face them. I never felt like I was afraid of Sadler, for example, and the endgame stuff really lacked in terms of conveying the feeling of finally finishing this mastermind behind all of the story events. And in trailers you can already see how much different Sadler is just from the way he talks. He's very creepy, and I think he'll behave more like Mother Miranda did in Village. You never see him that much, but this thought of there being a powerful figure manipulating everything is haunting. And this is something I can't stress enough. Resident Evil 4 has really unique villains, but I really want to see them as a threat, and not just as mad people doing and saying crazy and silly things, because that's almost a generic thing by now. I think they would benefit so much if we could see another side of them, this pure evil layer that would go so well with the different personalities, and that can be done by showing them doing diabolical things. Luis's death, for instance, can be much more than a reason to feel sorry for him. It's the perfect opportunity to show how evil Sadler is. I don't particularly enjoy the moment in the story this takes place in the original, and this will probably be changed in the remake, as well as all the interactions we have with Luis until this point, so that in the end it is more memorable. But as I said before, I wouldn't worry about what the developers are cooking here. I am totally okay if they end up changing a few things, even switching hats. This is the same team behind RE2 Remake, and you know how good that game was. It was expanded in ways no one saw coming and did an excellent job scaring the player. Resident Evil 4 is bigger in every way. Much more ambitious and challenging because of all the content and expectations surrounding the game, but they want to honor it. Honor the Resident Evil name. Honor its fans. And as a fan, I can tell they're on the right track and about to release one game that might stay with me as long as the original. And yes, I believe it will be evil. The very essence of evil. Horror is about this intense first contact you have with the unknown, since it never happens on the same level ever again. That's the main reason I still gravitate around the genre and find it so interesting and unique as a human experience. And if this approach to the remake is indeed happening, that's absolutely amazing, because if so, it will make me feel like I am back to my younger self days and I can finally feel as terrified as I once was.